Hey everyone, I'm David and welcome to Sound Theory Academy. In today's video, we're going to talk about this harmonic progression flowchart. This is a chart that I came across in undergraduate music theory when I was a student, and ever since I've been teaching, I've been using it as an instructional aid for getting students used to this idea of using all of the harmonies that we have in any kind of diatonic major or minor key. Now this flowchart does have its limitations. There are many more different kinds of harmonic progressions that you can do, but if you follow this harmonic progression flowchart, you will write strong progressions that make their way from tonic through as many of these chords as you want back to tonic in a really strong functional way. So let's get into that. Before we go any further, I do want to remind everyone to please subscribe to this channel if you like getting music theory content directly to your YouTube feed. All right, let's jump in. The first thing that we have to understand before we really unpack this flowchart is understanding harmonic function and how that applies to different chords within a major and minor key. There are three basic functions that we have. We have the tonic function, the dominant function, and predominant function. The tonic function is really about home. It's usually referring to the one chord, and it can have kind of alternative chords that serve as a tonic chord, but generally speaking, the tonic is where we have our home base, so one. And in this flowchart, we see that the tonic chord can move anywhere. When you're sitting on a tonic, it really can go to any chord, and it makes good sense. We also have the dominant function. Chords that have dominant function tend to move to a tonic function chord. So we usually see these chords 5 and diminished 7 moving directly to 1. I'll show you an exception to this in just a moment. And then finally, predominant chords. These are chords that have the function that they kind of want, they have a tendency to move to the dominant chord. So those are 2 and 4. When we use these chords, the general, usual pathway that they go is to move to the dominant before moving back to 1. Again, we'll come back to some exceptions to that. Now you can move interchangeably between 2 and 4, but when you're using these as predominant chords, then they move to 5. All right, so backing up from this, now we have the other chords that I didn't mention. The 3, the 6, these chords don't have such a strong function. However, if we're going to proceed 2 and 4, the really most common and strongest motion towards these chords is to use the 6th chord. So we're going to put that in the position right here before the predominant. The 6th chord moves really nice to the 2 chord because it has a circle of fifths motions. It's a falling fifth that goes from scale degree 6 in the bass to scale degree 2. And that circle of fifths kind of motion is really strong progression motion. And notice if we keep going, 6 to 2 to 5 to 1, this is a chain of chords that are related by fifths. So this is a circle of fifths progression. Now, 6 can obviously move to 4, and 4 can move to 5 to 1. So we have other options than doing a full circle of fifths. But that's why we put 6 here in this position. And moving back before this, we have our 3 chord. And you guessed it, we can proceed this through a 7 chord if we do a full circle of fifths progression. So looking at this entire flowchart, we see that we're moving through a circle of fifths, but as we get kind of closer to our tonic chord, we are going to have a lot more options in terms of which chords we move through. Now, I want to point out some really common exceptions here. Our 5 chord doesn't always move to 1, doesn't always have to move to 1. In fact, sometimes it's really desirable to move it instead to the 6th chord. And we call that a deceptive motion when 5 moves to 6. If it's at a cadence point, we call that a deceptive cadence. But a lot of times 5 is moving to 6, not in the context of the end of a phrase where we see cadences, but instead it's just deceptive motion, and it sounds really good. Another really common exception is the 4 chord, which can often go directly to 1. And when it does that, we call that plagal motion. And that's just a really cool way of kind of circumventing the dominant chord. It sounds great, and so we're going to have that exception on here. And finally, we see 3 that sometimes moves directly to 4. It's an approach from below to our predominant rather than from above, like 6 down to 4. Okay, now let's take a quick look at the minor key equivalent of this. This flowchart basically is the same as the one we were just looking at. The only exception is we're going to kind of replace some of the quality of the chords that are more native to the minor key. So you see our major 4 has now become minor, our 2 chord has become diminished, and we see a major 6 instead of a minor 6. So those are really just swapping out the qualities of these chords. But I do want to point out a fact here that the dominant chords, those stay the same. Those are using the kind of altered version of the minor scale. So we might have like a harmonic minor or a melodic minor scale that uses the leading tone instead of the natural flat 7. And that's when we use those chords as dominant. Okay, so how do we put this into practice? Well, one way that I like to think about that is to just start finding pathways through this flowchart. So starting on 1, we can move to any other chord. And then from there, let's just make our way to the right along this flowchart. Everything is kind of moving back toward 1. So let's try this. Let's go from 1 to 6 to 2 to 5. We'll take that deceptive motion to 6, and then we'll move back to 4, 2, 5, and 1. Now, let's see what it sounds like in practice. I'd say that's a pretty effective chord progression. It really follows the rules here in terms of a predominant moving to a dominant. And you can see as we follow this, it actually does create some pretty effective harmonic progressions. All right, that's just a quick rundown on this harmonic progression flowchart. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please give this a thumbs up. And remember, don't forget to subscribe so that you get these videos to your feed every week. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.